I'm the last man standing.
You all right?
Yeah. I'll never be able to understand that because I'm the eldest.
For decades, Barry Gibb kept silent about the darkest chapter of his family's story. Now, at 79, he is finally breaking that silence.
It's all about time. Today is tomorrow, winters are summers, and the end of the rainbow is here.
And what he admits about Andy Gibb is more heartbreaking than anyone imagined. Behind the fame, behind the #1 hits, there was a hidden battle that ended in tragedy. And Barry reveals the guilt, the secrets, and the memories that still haunt him to this day. What really happened? Join us. Barry's late life revelation. At 79 years old, Barry Gibb has finally broken his silence, and what he has revealed is as heartbreaking as it is raw. For decades, the last surviving member of the Bee Gees carried a private burden that he rarely allowed to surface in interviews, always choosing to celebrate the glamour and the music instead of the pain that haunted him. But now, looking back on the arc of his extraordinary life and career, Barry admits to the world what he once kept to himself: that his youngest brother, Andy, a dazzling star who seemed to have everything, was also the most fragile of them all. Why did it take Barry so long to share the full truth about Andy? What was it about Andy's story that still brings Barry regret and grief even after 40 years? And why, after all the triumphs, does Andy's loss overshadow them all? Barry Gibb has never fully stepped away from music. Even in his late 70s, he remains active as a songwriter and performer, proving that the creative drive that defined the Bee Gees has not diminished with age. In recent years, he released In the Now, a solo album that reaffirmed his musical vitality and proved that he's passing the tradition on to his children. But with age also comes reflection, and it is this stage of life that has made Barry more willing to revisit painful memories. The loss of Andy has always been the most sensitive of subjects, avoided whenever possible, or addressed only in carefully chosen words. For many years, Barry refused to let the darker details overshadow Andy's reputation as a gifted performer. But now, with the clarity that time brings, he has been more candid. Barry often described Andy as having the purest pop voice of the Gibbs, a voice that could slip effortlessly across melodies and draw audiences in without force or calculation. To him, Andy was a natural. His talent wasn't learned or honed in the grueling way the Bee Gees had developed theirs over years of performances in small clubs. Instead, Andy seemed born to do it. At just 19, he achieved chart-topping success that even older and more experienced artists could only dream of. But Barry also knew that such meteoric fame carried risks. When a young performer suddenly finds themselves in the spotlight, they are rarely prepared for the relentless scrutiny, the temptations, and the emotional exhaustion that comes with it. Andy, despite his brilliance, lacked the armor that might have allowed him to weather these pressures. Barry has admitted in recent interviews that he worried constantly about Andy's emotional vulnerability. On stage and in the studio, Andy projected charm, charisma, and joy. But behind the scenes, Barry recognized a younger brother searching desperately for love. For someone who craved connection, the highs and lows of sudden stardom could be crushing. Barry knew that Andy was drawn to quick fixes for his inner struggles, and he feared the path those choices could take him down. Looking back, he acknowledges that those fears were justified. The role of an elder brother carries a unique kind of responsibility, and for Barry, who was also the creative leader of the Bee Gees, this role felt doubly heavy. He produced Andy's hits, helped him find his musical identity, and defended him in the press. But when Andy's personal battles deepened, Barry found himself powerless. The memory that haunts him most is their final interaction. Barry recalled that he and Andy had a disagreement just days before Andy's 30th birthday. Only 5 days later, Andy was gone. For Barry, that final argument has become a wound that time has never closed. Andy's death at just 30 years old was more than a family tragedy. It was a fracture that altered Barry's perspective on everything that followed. The Bee Gees went on to achieve more accolades. Their music continued to define eras and generations. But for Barry, the loss of his baby brother remained the unspoken shadow over every success. He has described hearing Andy's voice in recordings or on the radio as moments that collapse time, as if the decades disappear and he is once again faced with the brother he could not save. Every concert where he sings Andy's songs is both a tribute and a reminder of what was lost. Andy's rise, fall, and legacy. The truth is that Andy was not just another young star who crumbled under pressure. He was, in fact, a groundbreaking artist whose career began with a record-breaking streak that no one in pop music history had achieved before him. But behind that historic rise was a private battle so severe that even his incredible achievements could not protect him. How does someone who seems to have everything, talent, looks, and success, fall so quickly? And why is it only now, after decades, that the full story is being revealed? Andy's entry into music felt almost inevitable. With older brothers already global stars, the path was illuminated. But Andy's personality and charisma meant he did not need to lean on the Bee Gees' fame to capture attention. From an early age, he had an extraordinary ability to connect with people, blending youthful innocence with the kind of charm that could win over audiences within minutes. His first recording showed not just promise, but something extraordinary, a voice that seemed tailor-made for the pop market of the late 1970s. Unlike many young artists who gradually built their careers, Andy's arrival was explosive. His debut single, "I Just Want to Be Your Everything," written by Barry, went straight to the top of the American charts in 1977. It was followed by "Love Is Thicker Than Water" and "Shadow Dancing," both of which also reached #1. In fact, Andy became the first solo artist in history to have his first 3 American singles all reach the top spot, an achievement that still shocks music historians when they revisit the charts of that era. But what the public saw was not the full story. Success on the surface masked deepening struggles underneath. Andy's sudden wealth and fame introduced him to a lifestyle that was exhilarating but also dangerous. His youth meant he lacked the discipline or structure to navigate these challenges, and as many who knew him later admitted, he was too trusting of people around him. Behind the glamour of chart success, Andy dealt with mounting financial instability, bouts of depression, and the growing hold of addiction. Substances became both a crutch and a curse, offering temporary relief from anxiety but worsening his long-term health and stability. These patterns are well documented in medical research. Prolonged substance abuse alters the brain's reward system, making recovery not only psychologically challenging, but biologically difficult. Andy's vulnerability made him especially at risk. When he died in March 1988, the official cause of death was myocarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart muscle. For most people, myocarditis is caused by viral infections, but in Andy's case, years of substance use had weakened his heart to the point where recovery was impossible. The tragedy is that Andy's death was not simply a result of one bad decision or a single night gone wrong. It was the culmination of years of accumulated damage, each choice taking him further from the possibility of a stable future. This medical reality is one of the most sobering parts of Andy's story. His death was not instant. It was gradual, invisible, and unstoppable once the decline had begun. Yet Andy's life was not defined only by struggle. He also had relationships that were central to his identity, including fatherhood. Andy's daughter, Peta, was born from his relationship with actress Kim Reeder. Although his time with her was limited by personal difficulties and the chaos of his career, the existence of his daughter added a new dimension to his legacy. Peta has since spoken about the challenge of growing up without her father, but she also preserves his memory in a deeply personal way. For Barry and the rest of the Gibb family, Andy's role as a father represents not only what was lost, but what continues on through the next generation. The Bee Gees themselves were not distant from Andy's career. Far from it, Barry, Robin, and Maurice played pivotal roles in shaping his music. Barry in particular poured his creativity into Andy's songs, writing and producing much of his material, ensuring that Andy would be more than just a younger brother riding the coattails of the Bee Gees' fame. In many ways, Andy became the vessel through which Barry could explore melodies and themes that might not have fit the Bee Gees' group identity, but worked perfectly for a solo pop act. This close collaboration highlights a paradox. Andy's success was in large part built on the foundation his brothers gave him, But that same closeness intensified Barry's sense of guilt when Andy began to fall apart. Away from the stage and the studio, Andy was far more than the headline suggested. He had a deep love for animals, especially dogs, and often spent free time fishing or simply enjoying family life in quieter settings. Friends and relatives recalled that Andy could be funny, warm, and disarmingly kind, qualities that rarely made it into the tabloids but defined who he was at his core. Today, Andy Gibb's cultural legacy remains surprisingly strong, even though his recording career lasted less than a decade. Fans who lived through the 1970s and 1980s recall his voice as the soundtrack of an era, while younger audiences discover him through streaming platforms and documentaries. The brevity of his career, paradoxically, adds to the sense of what might have been. Barry's burden: love, loss, and reflection. What makes Barry Gibb's story so different from many other legends of popular music is not simply his extraordinary success, but the fact that he has outlived every single one of his brothers. Andy was the first to go in 1988 at just 30 years old. Maurice followed in 2003 from complications during abdominal surgery, and Robin passed in 2012 after a long battle with cancer. This left Barry as the sole surviving Gibb brother, a role that he never asked for, but one that has shaped every aspect of his later life. Barry has been celebrated by fans and industry peers alike as the creative heart of the Bee Gees, the one whose falsetto voice became instantly recognizable around the world. And yet when he reflects privately, the absence of his brothers outweighs even the greatest triumphs. The music they made together brought them fortune and global fame, but it was also the music that tied them as a family. And without Robin, Maurice, and Andy, Barry often describes performing as both a celebration and a haunting. He has admitted that walking onto a stage today, decades after their loss, still brings with it the echo of their harmonies, voices that will never again join him in person. With Andy in particular, Barry's reflections carry an especially heavy note of regret. The two had been incredibly close, not only as brothers, but also as collaborators, with Barry pouring his own creative energy into Andy's early career. When Andy died just days after his 30th birthday, Barry was left devastated not only by the suddenness of the loss, but by the fact that their last interaction had been a disagreement. He has said openly that he carries that with him every day, a moment that replayed endlessly in his memory as a reminder of how fragile and unpredictable life can be. But Andy's story is not the only one that haunts him. When Maurice passed unexpectedly in 2003, Barry expressed that he had not spent as much time with him in the years leading up to his death as he wished he had. And when Robin fought cancer almost a decade later, Barry confessed that he struggled with the realization that his time with his twin brother was slipping away faster than he was prepared to accept. This sense of regret ties directly into Barry's lifelong role as the eldest brother, the leader of both the family and the band. From the early days in Australia to their breakthrough in England and later domination of the American charts, Barry was often the one steering the creative direction, organizing their musical output, and making business decisions. Leadership in a family dynamic brings with it a sense of responsibility that can become overwhelming when things go wrong. Barry has openly questioned whether he did enough, whether his guidance as the eldest was strong enough, and whether there were moments where he might have intervened differently. These reflections are not just about practical choices, but also about the moral and emotional obligations of being the oldest sibling, the one who is supposed to protect and nurture. The guilt he carries over Andy's struggles with fame and addiction is mirrored by the regret he feels for not having prevented or softened the hardships that Maurice and Robin endured before their deaths. Yet Barry has not allowed this burden to bury him entirely. Instead, he has chosen to carry his brothers forward in a variety of ways, ensuring that they remain not just part of his memory, but also part of the ongoing story of music. With Andy, this has taken the form of live performances of his songs, moments where Barry steps into the spotlight to revive melodies that were once his younger brother's signature. Audiences have often described these performances as both beautiful and heartbreaking, with Barry channeling his grief into something that allows fans to remember Andy not as a cautionary tale, but as a gifted artist whose music still resonates. In interviews, Barry has grown more candid with age. For years, he was careful to keep his emotions tightly guarded, preferring to celebrate the achievements of the Bee Gees and avoid lingering too long on painful personal subjects. But in recent years, particularly as he approached his late 70s, he has spoken with a new openness about Andy, acknowledging both his brilliance and his fragility. This honesty has not only humanized Barry, but also reframed the way the public views Andy, allowing people to understand the depth of his struggles while still appreciating the impact of his music. The act of speaking openly becomes a form of preservation, a way of keeping Andy's story alive in a way that is truthful rather than sanitized. Barry has also said that Andy's influence continues to find its way into his songwriting. Even decades after his passing, Andy's memory informs Barry's creative choices, shaping lyrics, melodies, and themes in subtle but meaningful ways. For Barry, writing music is not simply about creating songs for audiences. It is also about processing his own emotions and keeping alive the bonds that shaped him. In this sense, Andy remains present not as a shadow of regret, but as an active part of Barry's ongoing journey as a musician. What becomes clear when you listen to Barry speak is that Andy is not just remembered as the baby brother who died young. He is remembered as an integral part of the Gibb story, someone whose presence and absence have both profoundly shaped Barry's life. When Barry recalls Andy's laughter, his charm, and his struggles, he is not painting a picture of a tragic figure to be pitied. He is describing a human being whose short life had lasting significance, both to his family and to the broader world of music. This reframing matters because it resists the temptation to reduce Andy to a headline or a cautionary tale. Instead, it restores him to his rightful place as part of a family narrative that has been both extraordinary and deeply painful. The emotional weight of outliving all of his brothers cannot be overstated. Psychologists who study grief describe something called survivor's guilt, a phenomenon where people who outlive others, especially those they love, feel a persistent sense of responsibility for being the one who remains. Barry's reflections often mirror this concept, with his repeated questioning of whether he did enough or whether different choices might have altered the course of events. At the same time, his resilience, his choice to keep performing, to keep writing, to keep speaking about his brothers, demonstrates another psychological reality: the use of legacy as a coping mechanism. By making sure that Andy, Maurice, and Robin are never forgotten, Barry transforms his grief into a form of continuity, ensuring that their lives continue to echo through his own. This dual reality, grief and preservation, regret and resilience, defines Barry's late life reflections. He has achieved what very few artists in history have managed, creating songs that span generations and remain part of global culture. But in his personal life, the losses have left scars that never fully heal. What makes his recent candor so powerful is that it allows audiences to see the man behind the legend, someone who is not simply a star, but a brother, a husband, a father, and above all, a survivor navigating the complexities of love and loss. For Barry Gibb, telling the truth about Andy is not just about revisiting the past. It is about acknowledging the enduring impact of family bonds, the regrets that shape a lifetime, and the ways in which love continues even after death. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the next video for more exciting content.